An unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect Dharma is rarely met with, even in 100,000 million kalpas. Having it to see and listen to, remember and accept, I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's teaching.
In Buddhism, when Zen practitioners share their understandings of the teachings and practice, it's offered on the basis of dana paramita. Dana is a Pali word that means generosity or to give freely, and this is done without the expectation of anything in return when the opportunity arises. Those who share the teachings at Great Tree do so on a dana basis, and please support their practice if you can. You can go to greattreetemple.org, hit the support button, and then you can make a note that it's for Genjo today. So our speaker today is Reverend Genjo Williams. Genjo is a student of Reverend Teijo Munnich in the Jikai Dainin Katagiri Roshi lineage of Soto Zen Buddhism. He started his practice in 2011. In 2023, Genjo ordained as a priest, and the following year practiced at Kotaiji and Toshoji Zen training monasteries. Genjo served as shuso, or head of practice, at Great Tree Zen in 2025. And currently he lives in Asheville, although he's very shortly moving to Durham, where he works as a counselor and psychotherapist, practices aikido, and continues his practice with Great Tree and the Zen Center of Asheville. And the title of his talk today is Deep Listening.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I was actually grateful for the weather conditions this morning. Here it's rainy and thundery, and for me, kind of the ideal conditions to talk about deeply listening. For me, listening to the sound of thunder and rain is very easy and very pleasant. Um, so I'm grateful for the rain and the thunder. Um, So a little bit, I guess, of kind of the behind the scenes of this talk, or of the title of this talk, some context. Um, Earlier this year, in March, I went to the Pacific Northwest for the first time. Um, I went to a sesshin at Great Vow Monastery, just outside of Portland, about an hour's drive outside of Portland, in Clatskanie, Oregon. And the title of this sesshin was Deep Listening. And so there were three teachers who co-led this sesshin. Um, and they they really encouraged us to use listening, to use sound, to use hearing as our kind of our anchor in the practice while we were sitting, but then also as we moved through the week, to kind of center ourselves and return to just listening. Um, and at times during the sitting, during those Zazen periods, um, certain instruments would be played here and there. There was um, a harmonium at times and a steel drum at times. Um, and yeah, the encouragement was just to just listen, um, as our practice. And it kind of spurred for me a real deep curiosity in this practice, and in uh, the nature of sound or of listening and what it means to deeply listen. What is sound? What is hearing? And how do we practice listening? How do I practice listening? Um, Around the same time I got back into my counseling practice around the same time and came across a collection of essays on Buddhism and psychotherapy, which for me is a very interesting topic. Um, and there's lots of arguments that you can and people do make for ways that the two support each other and that the two are very different. Um, and of course, psychotherapy in and of itself is a whole range. It's a huge world, as is Buddhism, right? And so, but it's an interesting exploration for me. And in one of this was edited by a scholar, I think out in Oregon, Mark Unno. He's a professor and a Pure Land Buddhist priest. Um, and in one of the essays, he's talking about the founder, Shinran Roshi, of a branch of Pure Land Buddhism. And so I also got really interested in um, this teacher, Shinran. Um, and I won't go too much into his biography. I'm still learning myself. But what I will say about Shinran is he lived about the same time as Dogen Zenji. I think he was born a little bit before and lived to be a little older than Dogen Zenji. But they both trained on Mount Hiei, which is a big at that time period was I would say one of the most prominent training monasteries in Japan, in the Tendai school of Buddhism. And similar to Dogen Zenji, he got kind of disillusioned with the state of Buddhism, with how it was really, from his perspective, um, too enmeshed with the government. Uh, and so his teacher Honen, the founder of Pure Land Buddhism, was very outspoken about this. And it ended up in Honen and several of his disciples, including Shinran, either um, being killed by the government or being stripped of um, their priest title. And so in Shinran's case, he was stripped of his title. And for him, it kind of awoke him to this new practice where the term in Japanese he used was hiso hizoku, neither priest nor layperson. And for me, I think it's very moving for me because we're in this time in um, Zen in the United States where we're really exploring that practice, you know, that continuity maybe of practice. Um, and so one thing when Shinran was talking about what is his role as a priest, um, he said his role is to deeply listen and to role model deep listening. Um, and so I read this right before I was going into this deep listening session at Great Vow, and so it became really um, just paying. I just started to pay attention to that. Okay, what does that mean? Deep listening. What is this practice? And it's taken me all over the place, and if my notes reflect that, if you could see them. Um, but of course, sound, is one of these things that are just in many ways a part of life, and silence as well, a part of that, and it's been interesting too to read about and hear how different spiritual traditions hold sound and silence. And so I want to just read some quotes that I've come across about silence and sound in spiritual practice. Um, this one is from Rufus Jones, and he was a Quaker. And he says, the early friends made the discovery that silence is one of the best preparations for communion with God and for the reception of inspiration and guidance. Silence itself, of course, has no magic. It may be just sheer emptiness, absence of words, or noise or music. It may be an occasion for slumber, or it may be a dead form, but it may be an intensified pause, a vitalized hush, a creative quiet, an actual moment of mutual and reciprocal correspondence with God. what Rumi says is, this is how it always is. When I finish a poem, a great silence overcomes me, and I wonder why I ever thought to use language. He also says that let silence take you to the core of life. In the Shurangama Sutra, at one point in it, um, the Buddha invites, in this particular sutra, the Buddha invites 25 different bodhisattvas to talk about their practice and how they realized awakening. And when it's Avalokiteshvara's turn, Avalokiteshvara prostrates to the Buddha and says, I still remember that day. No, I still remember that long before numbers of eons called. Here we go. I still remember that long before a number of eons, countless as the sand grains in the Ganges, a Buddha called Avalokiteshvara appeared in the world. Under him, I gave rise to the Bodhi mind. I was instructed by him to enter samadhi by means of the learning or of hearing, contemplating, and practicing. At first, amidst the stream of hearing, the object of sound ceased. Having stilled the hearing of sounds, the attributes of sound and silence also ceased to arise. Gradually progressing in this way, the hearing and that which was heard ceased. Even when that state in which everything had come to an end disappeared, I did not rest. Then awareness and the objects of my awareness were emptied. And when that process of emptying my awareness was thoroughly perfected, even that emptying and that which had been emptied ceased. Then arising and ceasing ceased to be. Nirvana manifested. And so there they're talking about the instruction they got to use hearing as kind of a dharma gate, a gate of liberation, is my understanding. I've also recently come across this book. It's by the first Jungian psychoanalyst in Japan. And for him, his koan, kind of his life, his embodied question became, what does it mean to be Buddhist and a psychoanalyst in this Western kind of psychotherapeutic practice? And he's a Japanese Hayao Kawai. And he talks about how he didn't identify and actually rejected Buddhism um, when he grew up in Japan, and it was actually his going to the West to train as a psychoanalyst that awakened, um, all the ways that Buddhism was alive in his life without necessarily knowing it. Um, but at one point, he's talking about his role as a therapist and his practice as a therapist. And he says, as he's become more and more experienced, he's more and more silent, and he really doesn't say much. And he talks about when he goes into sitting across from someone and listening or being doing that work, as he imagines himself as a stone or as Kanon Bodhisattva, Avalokiteshvara, or as a patient. He doesn't go in as the therapist. Um, he goes in as a stone. And so again, there's something there about silence and sound. Um, so what I've been thinking about too, what's kind of arisen is how, sound is a concept, it's a construct. It gives rise to all, to consciousness, to the skandhas. We hear something and we kind of externalize it and have a story, apply language to it, and maybe an image arises, and then a story gets created around that sound. So it's an opportunity to study the self, to see the mind. Um, and just listening practice. two, it's really an embodied practice because, the colloquial understanding of sound is that there's something happening out there. Um, Someone made a sound, maybe, or something made a sound. But the reality is, um, the sound only exists in our own mind. It's actually when it flows into us, the vibrations, that sound is created. And so it really is a practice of embodiment of this just listening practice, returning to sound. And I've started to use it as a way to really continue practice off the cushion. And for me, in a very accessible way, um, because there's always the opportunity to listen. you know, there's a continuity there. And so when my practice has become to notice when I'm doing that thing that we do, that thinking thing, that discriminating thing, throughout my day and return to just listening, sitting in my car and this morning listening to the rain, but also listening or hearing really the sounds of traffic in my car and Kiku as she was making her sounds. But also, in the grocery store when I'm in line or when I'm waiting, I've tried to kind of shift from waiting to listening, right? Recognizing that there's nothing really ever I need to be waiting for. I can kind of return to my practice, return to just listening. Um, so there's that, and then there's this deep, qualifier. What does it mean to deeply listen? Um, you know, for me, it almost seems like which it's not actually listening with the ears, but listening with my heart or with my hara, with my guts. Um, when I was in school for therapy, we talked a lot about active listening. And the best or the most helpful, I'll say the most helpful kind of description of that active listening practice for me was it was talked about as when we're actively listening. We're listening to the sounds outside of us, or in this case, the person, but then we're also listening to our own internal experience. We're listening what is coming up for us, what we're feeling, what we're experiencing. But then we're also listening to the flow of the relationship. We're listening to the texture of the field we're in or the connection we're in. And so there's kind of those three intertwined realms, the other person, my own experience, but then the flow, the energy between us. We're listening to all three of those. And there's when I'm talking about them separately, but really they're not separate phenomenon. They're all arising as one. Um, there's a sand play therapist, and she wrote an essay on silence, and she broke it down into three different types, and not in a hierarchical way, but just three different types. She talks about ego silence, which is like she describes it as going into a library, when there's this kind of rule around silence. This is a space where um, the rule is to be silent. And then she talked about, I think she called it a natural silence. She talked about being out in nature, and there's this kind of quiet that exists, which isn't the absence of sound, but there's this quietness that is there and that I think we can open up to thinking about like the benefits of a forest bathing practice of just being out and opening up to the quiet of nature. And then she talks about deep silence, which she calls deep silence, which she talks about as experiencing the ineffability and the profundity, as she talks about it, of touching into the collective unconscious. Um, she's a Jungian, really a Kolfian sand play therapist. Dora Kolf created this way of sand play therapy. Dora Kolf was herself a student of Carl Jung, so it's a kind of depth considered a depth psychology. And so that's kind of the language or the world she's in as she's talking about this. So she talks about it as touching into that unconscious, that void where everything exists. We would talk about it maybe as emptiness in Buddhist terms, where everything is everything, you know. There's also um, in the pre-Buddhist religion of Japan, Shintoism is kind of an indigenous religious practice that is still very much alive and very much a part of Japanese Buddhism. The two have fused in many ways, from my experience and understanding. But in Shintoism, there's a concept called koto dhamma. Koto is word, and dhamma is soul or spirit. And it's the belief that words, sounds, language are alive. They have spirits in and of themselves. Um, and so language and words and the sounds that we create, thinking of sound and speaking as a creative activity are very important, because they are alive and they affect the world around us, and I think that's very true, um, in my experience. And I think across the map, science, I'm always seeing something about in science how singing or speaking kindly to your plants does a lot for them. It helps them grow, And I recently received a money plant from a friend. It was dying. It was in really rough shape. As soon as I brought it to my house, about five big leaves collapsed. They just dropped. But I was really determined to nurse it back to health. So I've been, like whispering sweet nothings to it every day. Essentially, I've been really, really talking it up. I've been really, really, yeah, just giving it lots of love. And it's looking good. I will say, it's got new sprouts. I did other things like give it a larger pot and change the soil. But I've been speaking kindly to it too. Um, and in my experience too, I can feel that. I can feel when someone is speaking lovingly to me versus hatingly. It's a very different experience. And when I think about it in terms of like it's all just energy, right? We're all just energy. Everything is energy. There's a real energy to our language and words and our intention, and how we're speaking and what we're speaking. And it has an effect. I remember when I was in the monastery once, uh, it was in the morning and we had just sat, and um, the practice there was there's silent times. And so really from lights out or really a little bit before, um, is quiet until we have community tea in the morning, and so we do our sitting in the morning, we would chant, and then do um, cleaning the temple, and then have tea. And that tea, um, the abbot would, um, you know, offer a good morning to us, and we would respond. And then the silence was kind of officially lifted. And I remember one morning, um, it was during the morning chanting. Um, I had this really um, impactful thought of like, oh, like I just realized the first thing I had done with my voice was to chant. And it really moved me, that kind of realization. And I thought, oh, this is the only thing I want to do with my voice. This is the only way I want to use my voice, um, is to chant. And that was that moment. That thought left. It came and it left. And here we are. But I still feel that in me, you know. Do a time check. I don't know what else to say, if there's anything to say. So yeah, I'm just continuing, I'm continuing to return to just listening, and also yeah, but also very curious about what that means. And we're in a book study right now at Great Tree. We're studying Christine Feldman's Boundless Heart. It's an exploration of the four divine abodes or the four heavenly abodes or the Brahma Viharas they have different names. Um, but we're exploring compassion. And it's been a really rich exploration. And, of course, um, what's coming up for me too a lot these days is Katagiri Roshi's book. You have to say something, you know. Um, as much as I may want to be a stone, I'm not a stone, and there's gifts of that. And so returning to, okay, how can I use this gift of being human? This gift, my particular gifts being this human too, that we all have. We all are our own unique person, um, and have our own unique skills and our own unique karma and our own unique offerings that only we can share, you know. And so returning to that, okay, how can I practice that? How can I use, not in a kind of using a tool type of way, but how can I appreciate this gift of life, you know? Sorry, my yeah. Yeah, my dog Kiku is putting herself under the taiko drum right now. Okay. The rain's just picked up. Uh, so maybe let's just listen to the rain for a few minutes, and then I think this is kind of the Quakers. I've never actually experienced this, but my understanding is that the Quakers practice this. They gather and then just listen or just sit. I don't know actually how they talk about it, but when someone feels the spirit to speak, they just say something. And so let's maybe just sit. And if you have anything to say or question to ask or something to share, we can do that. She's a little scared of the rain and thunder. Okay. For a second, she was balanced on the taiko sticks. It was very impressive.
Genjo-san, I was thinking in your descriptions about how our practice of Zazen creates the conditions and the quality for that quietude, developing quietude and silence. And our very practices, that's where we go to, I think, that, yes, to cultivate this quietude, science, a way of being. So as you were explaining it about listening and various spiritual practices and different ones that participate in that. You know, it all seems to have that inherent quality of what you say, deep listening, and it's there in our zazen. It's there, and that's when we think of practice. It's in there, and I suppose in a sense, in a lot of ways, in shikantaza, but that of course zazen is a process, on a bullet train there. So thank you for all your insights. Yeah, and listening, energy. Yeah. Mm. If you will, I'd like to add to that. I was working it out as I usually do. It's unfolding out loud, as you know. And I think that's where we find those seeds, what I refer to as Bodhi seeds of the Brahma Viharas. I think if that quietude, as we're cultivating that, I think that's where they come up. And then we embody them in those feelings, sensations, and even, of course, in mind, Yogacara. So as you mentioned about our book study, this seemed to be the essence of our being, as Brahma Viharas is there if we listen to them, using your practice of listening to them. That's all for
Yeah.
What you said made me realize what a narrow kind of bandwidth I operate in. Even when I first read the title, Deep Listening, even when I'm listening deeply, I'm typically having words come through my mind. And then if I'll respond, it'll be in words. And there is just so much more, so much more in terms of depth to even listening. The word listening is a kind of super active word typically in my consciousness, and hearing about Avalokiteshvara describing the layers beneath that, that's incredible, and normally, outside of what's happening. Yeah, so I really appreciate your talk and opening up this this whole set of possibilities. And yeah, so thank you very, very much.
I'd like to thank you for putting all this together. And some of the things that like came up for me, you were talking about silence and then the different ways that there's a communication going on a few different levels, so it's the same. And I think about like deep listening must have something to do with like an awareness. First that you're listening and then trying to pick up on that communication, what that is. And also I was thinking about the nature of silence, and like I'm not sure I've ever had perfect silence, there's always something. And I'm someone that likes to distract with sound and music and things, and can be listening to it and realize, or a podcast and realize like, oh wait, I gotta go back. I was not paying attention. I wasn't deep listening, I missed it or something. And then I sort of feel that that could be like a silence of the of mindfulness, like it was silence in the moment. It wasn't picking up. And yeah, there's just a lot of really neat things that you put out there, and I appreciate how you used the psychotherapy as well, and some of the other examples, because for me, I feel like I'm a unique example of a bunch of different things that are in there, and silence. Yeah, I appreciate the silence too, and the way you go into this.
Yeah, thank you.
One thing that I'm feeling is like, the more you practice silence and the more, I guess, like reverence that you have for silence, the more it makes, it's like, if it's something that's really important, then it's like a big deal to break the silence, you know what I mean? It's like when you say something, if you really appreciate silence in that way, it should be something that's worth saying, because I feel like something that you kind of pointing out is the constant noise to kind of drown out the stuff that you're listening to that is worth listening to. And it's just like, all right, you practice appreciating the silence, then it sort of makes these other things seem deeper.
Well, I'm back.
Well, listening to the reading, I was thinking about this experience of just having years. But there's this little hole, there's two little holes, and the sound just kind of flows in, and I don't really have to do it. And my mind constrained here, but my ears are never strained. There's no strain in receiving sound. There's no. And then I wondered about how the tree hears them. So it doesn't have ears, but there's still this responsiveness. And then I just sat in that gap between the sound and the experience of it, and the different ways to experience it.
Sound good. Did you want to say?
Yes, thanks. What I'm hearing from the sharings and their own experiences and insights, everyone has spoken, and I've mentioned it before in our group, but Teijo, you really have an appreciation for it. Nothing new to you on Lectio Divina, which comes from Benedictine Trappist Cistercian world. And its literal translation is sacred reading, but it's really sacred listening.
Mm.
It's the intentional, active listening to the words, and everything in between the words. And it has various models, but I'll just use this one. It's also listening instead of reading, listening, receiving, ruminating, responding. So it's a process that just keeps unfolding, not even necessarily in the moment, sometimes right away. It might be a week, a month, 6 months, sometimes a year. It comes back up, but it's a practice that I feel it's a tremendous mindfulness practice, frankly.
Mm.
And so I know Teijo was deeply in that point, and it was part of my life early on. I wanted to share that with everyone because that's what it reminds me of. What everybody is saying. It reminds me of that.
I was at the nature center the other day. I hadn't been there in years. It was lots of flashbacks. But there was a barn owl there, and it was sleeping, or I don't know what it was doing. It looked like it was sleeping in its little house, and it was facing us. And there was a little sign out front, giving some facts, and it was talking about this. The factoid was about how the shape of its face was like concave, and that its ears are asymmetrical, which maximizes its ability to hear. Um, and I mean, I think what you were talking about, Jakushin, and just recognizing, that nothing exists in a vacuum. We didn't just evolve, on our own, but we evolved as an aspect of the world, of a universe. We're all evolving together and responding, and I think listening, and we've evolved to connect, to be connected because we are connected. Um, and that we do that in different ways. And even if, you're not able to hear in the traditional sense, there's still, I think, a listening that is occurring. There's still a responsiveness or something, you know. And sometimes it's actually, in my experience, like we can hear each other better in silence when we're not saying anything. I think that's the experience of sesshin, when we're sharing that silence together after a couple days. Once you get over the hump, once you get over the hump and you kind of can drop down into whatever that we drop down into, there's this deep listening that's happening, even though we're not really talking to each other.
I'm thinking about deep listening as like reading the room and how helpful that can obviously be to be able to, and as listening, not particularly like with the ears, but all the senses and like the energy as well. Like when you were saying that, like about listening to music or podcasts, I noticed that sometimes I'll be like watching TV or listening to music, and then like, ugh, I don't like this one, and I'll skip and I'll skip and I'll skip, and then, but the read the room that I need to do for myself is like maybe I don't even want to listen to anything, or like just stuff like that, or I was listening to a podcast about like Buddhism in romantic relationships, like long-term relationships, and it was talking about like the in-between, like when you're having a fight or an argument, the in-between energy that's happening that maybe like neither of you are listening to because you're just like talking on both sides. And the in-between is usually like pretty loud, but it's the energy of like, okay, what is actually happening here? Yeah, so yeah, I feel like I usually deeply listen, like without my ears in a way.
Yeah, you're talking about how like at some points when you say the word listen, we're kind of like saying feel, like feel what's going on for a minute so that you can like listen to the inside.
There's one of the first phrases I learned in Japanese was kuki o yomu, kuki o yomimasu. And it means it's kind of to read the room or read the air, right? Kuki o yomu. And it's I think it's one of the first things I learned because it's so important in that culture. It's so important in terms of connection to be able to read what's happening without necessarily being told, or needing to ask. It's and in those moments when I can't, I really feel the ostracization, particularly over there, you know.
My Japanese roommate one time, she didn't like something or something like that. And I said, why not? She said, she just said the word feeling. That was the only word she used. She didn't say it in English, but I don't know the Japanese word, but it just means, it just didn't feel good to her.
Yeah, and like that's enough.
Yeah.
There's no yeah.
When we talk about this, like I'm getting a sense we're moving from listening to sounds to like heeding all the senses and honoring the information we get from them. And that reminds me of what I'm trying to do on the cushion. Moving from just the one sense to kind of seeing the interconnectedness of all the senses.
Yeah, something I've read before about intuition that made it less like mythical to me was that it just said that it's kind of actually just your subconscious picking up on like little things here and there off your senses over a long period of time and then creating this like puzzle piece to come to this conclusion, and then it seems like it just comes out of nowhere, but it's really just your subconscious constantly listening to everything around.
I really like the relationship to sound and silence that I've come to cultivate, particularly in Zendos, where Zendos are sort of ideally quite silent places, but inevitably noises happen, like the world exists. And I feel like it's really helped me understand this idea of just like harmoniousness or like inner silence, regardless of what is going on, like the ability to just hear something that's maybe distracting you from your silent meditation, but not react to it and just maintain that stillness. And even, there are times I'd say in the greater world where the direct relationship I have with the silence isn't super positive, where maybe you're scared to speak or you're in the library and someone hushes you, it's like there are a lot of times where silence itself can be somewhat overbearing. But just the idea of whether it's silence or sound, fully accepting it and harmonizing with it, with whatever you're doing in your being. I think that's kind of what the Zendos particularly they've been able to like instill into my being.
That sort of brought up a memory for me. When we were in the monastery, we were right near the Japan seaside, and so occasionally there would be hurricanes or typhoons. I don't know what's the difference, but they call them typhoons. And so when there were typhoons, a lot of our work was outside, so they send us to the meditation hall during the typhoon, and we would just sit there for a couple hours and I was thinking about when you were talking, someone brought that up for me, how it's sort of that energy sort of takes away all of the thinking that I was doing. You know, it just brought about a stillness in me, even though it was really loud and everything was rattling and you know, there's a lot of wind and rain and everything. But those were some of my favorite times in meditation. And I think it's because it just kind of takes away that overthinking that we usually do.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone's ever gotten an MRI, but I actually, like, I've gotten one MRI and I found such great peace inside of the machine, even though there's like all this crazy buzzing and whirring, and it really seems like some kind of nightmare, but it was so peaceful to me for some reason.
It's like a drummer.
Yeah. It's like-
A drummer.
I'm really grateful for all the dogs, and I think about the sounds, like the little knocking some stuff over, and the look. He was like, "Wow, that's a lot of noise." And I don't know what he was thinking, but like just watching how their ears are and thinking about how they listen in ways like I've been hiking with my dog, and he's heard something, looked up, and I'm like, "Oh, I would have seen that deer had you not heard it first," because I'm, I don't, my hearing's not as good, or my awareness to my area. But with dogs doing all that, that's, to me, that seems really interesting. Like if we could ask them, like, then thinking about it as a sense, like it's like seeing. They're like, you hear something. I heard a beeping of something maybe backing up, and I was like picturing like might be someone's picking up the trash, or like I've got a little vision going on, and so like you know it's just another sensation that kind of has the same qualities of other sensations. Like it's a hearing. There might even be a flavor. Like certain things are like, oh, that was tasty. That sound, I really liked it. It like nourished me. Like that's what I wanted to hear.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the dogs,
Uh-huh.
they teach us. I mean,
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
they listen.
Yeah. She teaches me a lot.
For the MRI thing that we think about, like me feeling, I've been diagnosed with ADHD. Having ADHD, I was looking into why it seems like binaural beats or like techno music seems to keep my mind quiet. It's actually like finally known that our brains are quieter when they have like nature sounds or like something to listen to. Like sitting in a really quiet room is just like painful for people, especially in like offices and stuff, because primarily we're like used to having our brain kind of on this background like mode of like listening to like the trash being picked up or like someone walking over there or deer behind us. It keeps our brain busy, like with survival. Does that make sense? And like lets another part of our brain calm down. Yeah.
It makes me think of the difference, which is just a categorization. It's neither here nor there. But the difference I experience between when something is merely and simply sound, simply itself, and when it starts to feel like noise. Like if I'm in someone's house and they always have the television on, like I've often found myself saying I can't hear anything, even though I'm actually hearing something all the time, and that's maybe part of the problem. It's like there's a coherence to sound, and to natural sounds, that feels very like orienting or stabilizing, where something that I would categorize as maybe noise maybe has an intensity or a disharmony to it that is a little that then maybe there's something in me that's trying to, you know, arrange around that or figure it out, or maybe it's too much. Yeah.
That makes me think of driving in a car and you have to turn down the music in order to like transition. Like really
Yeah, it's like
way.
it was too loud, I can't see type of thing. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. I think it's that time.
I'll make a few brief announcements. Probably the most timely one is tonight. We're watching The Matrix. And I think I'm trying to get the little schedule that you put together. Let's
Do
see.
you want me to say it?
Yeah, okay.
You got it? Or
I just found it, but you can also say it.
okay. We'll do 2 periods of Zazen. So we'll sit from 6 to 6:40, do 10 minutes of Kinhin, and then sit again from 6:50 to 7:30. And so that's not obligatory to watch the movie, but we'll start the movie a little after 7:30. But I think it'll be a good primer to sitting to going into the Matrix. Yeah.
So I think right after this, before we start the work period, I want to talk snacks. So if people are gonna come, I want to like let me know so I can kind of get a head count and we can just like talk about snacks, and that's like an important thing for me. So yeah. Anyways, and then yeah, if you either tell me now or if you're like online and you want to come, just email me info@greattreetemple.org. So that's tonight. I was just kind of wanted to tell people about just the weekly schedules because I feel like that's good to do. There's morning meditation on Wednesday morning, 6 to 7:30 a.m. There's Tonglen weekly on Thursdays, 9:30 to 10 a.m. Thursdays also has an evening meditation, 6 to 7:30 p.m., which includes like the Kinhin walking meditation as well. And then our speaker next weekend will also be Genjo, and the title of his talk for next weekend is Zazen Community Ritual.
Let's bring up a bottle of bone,
Oh yeah.
Oh, wrong brain.
which is, what's the date on that? The 26th? 26th
Sunday.
yeah. And usually one is like a 3-day thing, but we're just abbreviating it this year to kind of get it started. It's usually done at this time of year, and it's a commemoration of, it's kind of remembering ancestors. And in preparation for that, it's traditional to clean the graveyard at the temple. And we happen to have a graveyard. It only has pets in it right now, but we're going to be doing that maybe next week and possibly the week after. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so if people can come for that
Yeah.
to help out,
Yeah.
that's good.
Mm.
And we'll be sending out information on email about Obone, what it's about, what we're gonna be doing, how you can ask for chanting and prayers for your ancestors and friends and pets who have died. And we'll be doing some things around that on that Sunday. And it also happens to be Family Meditation Sunday, so it will be all of us together doing that. And we'll have a traditional crafts connected with Oman also. So that'll be a longer time, and people can bring things to eat, and so that's what's happening on the 26th.
So we'll give back the merit. May the merit of this practice benefit all beings and bring peace.